When you see your sister wearing a mask of your face for Halloween, you laugh. But when you realize she's been wearing that mask for years, metaphorically speaking, and nobody noticed, well, that's when it gets truly terrifying. On the night of October 31st, 2024, sitting at my father's dinner table, I finally saw who my sister Violet really was. And it wasn't a costume. It was a nightmare that had been unfolding for 28 years. My father placed the bank documents on the table between us like tarot cards revealing a dark future. Halloween candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, children screamed trick or treat, but inside that dining room, the only trick being revealed was the one that had destroyed our family. "Emma," my father said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade, $200,000 gone, and every transaction leads back to your signature. My heart stopped. My signature? What $200,000? I whispered, feeling panic crawl up my throat. And that's when I looked at Violet. My sister sat across the table, dressed in that elaborate dark queen costume she'd spent weeks making. Black crown with thorns, blood-red velvet dress, dramatic makeup that made her eyes look like empty caverns. But what made me freeze wasn't the costume. It was the expression on her face when Dad mentioned the money. She went white. Not that normal white of surprise, that cadaver white, like every drop of blood had been instantly sucked from her body, like she'd seen a ghost. Or like she was the ghost. Let me tell you something about Violet that I should have noticed a long time ago. She'd always been obsessed with masks. When we were kids, she collected theater masks, Venetian masks, African tribal masks, said she loved how masks allowed people to hide who they really were while pretending to be something else. Mom used to laugh and say Violet would be an incredible actress someday. Dad said she had too much imagination for her own good. Me, I just thought it was weird, but I never questioned it, because questioning Violet was like poking a hornet's nest. You never knew what kind of sting you'd get back. We grew up in a small town in upstate New York near the Canadian border, where winters were brutal and summers were too short. Our house was one of those old Victorian mansions with 3 floors, a creepy attic, and a basement that smelled of mildew and buried secrets. Mom died when I was 16 and Violet was 13, ovarian cancer that ate her alive in less than 6 months. After that, Dad dove into work. He was a commercial real estate broker, and I became Violet's substitute mother. I cooked, cleaned, drove her to school, helped with homework. I sacrificed my teenage years to take care of her. And her? She hated me for it. I didn't realize it at the time, of course. I thought she was just grieving, that her anger, the tantrums, the occasional lies were just part of the healing process. But years later, in therapy, yes, I eventually got therapy because who wouldn't need it after growing up in that house? My psychologist told me something that changed everything. Emma, you weren't Violet's mother, you were her keeper, and keepers are resented by those they keep. That hit me like a punch because it was true. Violet didn't see me as her sister who loved her. She saw me as the person who controlled her life, who kept her from doing what she wanted, who took Mom's place but could never really fill it. When I turned 23, I escaped. There's no other word for it. I ran. I got a full scholarship for a master's in architecture in Boston and left town without looking back. Violet was 20 at the time, theoretically old enough to take care of herself, but the way she looked at me when I said I was leaving, it was like I'd driven a knife into her back. "You're abandoning me," she said, voice cold as winter ice, "just like Mom abandoned us." "Mom didn't abandon us, Vi," I said, using the childhood nickname she normally loved. "She died. It's not the same thing." "Isn't it?" Violet smiled, but there was no warmth in that smile. "Feels the same from here." I should have paid attention to that moment, should have seen the neon warning flashing in front of me, but I was so desperate to live my own life that I ignored it. I moved to Boston, dove into studies, made friends, dated, finally breathed air that wasn't saturated with duty and guilt. I called home once a week, visited on major holidays, but I kept my distance because distance was survival. Violet, meanwhile, stayed home with Dad. She was studying graphic design at a local community college, though she rarely talked about it. Whenever I asked how school was going, she'd change the subject. She'd talk about parties she'd been to, people she'd met, things she'd bought. Dad paid for everything, her tuition, her apartment downtown that she insisted on renting after fighting with him, her new car. He never offered me those things, but I never asked either, because I had too much pride. Or maybe I just knew that with Violet, everything came with a price, and I'd already paid enough. Years passed, 3 to be exact, and then in September 2024, I got a call from Dad that would change everything. His voice was strange on the phone, tense, almost scared. "Emma, I need you to come home. There's something I need to discuss with you and Violet, in person." My stomach tightened. "Are you sick?" "No," he said quickly. "No, nothing like that. I've made some decisions about my future, about our future, and I need to talk to both of you together." The word together made me shudder. Violet and I hadn't been together since Christmas 2023, when we had an epic fight about, ironically, inheritances. Not ours, but the inheritance of a friend of hers. Violet had spent the entire Christmas dinner complaining about how unfair it was that this friend's parents had left everything to the oldest son just because he'd stuck around, while the daughters lived their lives. "I mean, how stupid is that?" she'd said, looking directly at me. "Punishing people for wanting their own lives?" Dad had changed the subject quickly, but the message was clear. Violet thought I'd be punished for leaving, and part of me wondered if she was right. But I agreed to go home. I arrived 2 days later on a rainy Friday in September. The house seemed smaller than I remembered, darker. The trees around it had grown wild, their branches scratching at the windows like skeletal fingers. Dad greeted me at the door with a tight hug and a kiss on the forehead. "Violet's arriving in an hour. We'll wait for her to talk." We used that hour for small talk. He told me about a big real estate deal he'd closed, about how he was thinking of retiring, about how the house was getting too big for him alone. And then Violet arrived. She entered like a storm, black hair cut in a sharp bob that wasn't there last time I saw her, dark red lipstick, tight black clothes that made her look older than her 23 years. She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes, something I couldn't identify. Anger? Triumph? Fear? Then she smiled, that toothpaste commercial smile, and said, "Emma, what a pleasant surprise." But the way she said surprise made me feel like she knew exactly I'd be there and had prepared. We sat in the living room, that same room where we used to open Christmas presents when Mom was still alive. Dad cleared his throat, clasped his hands, and gave us the news. He's retiring, selling the business, and he plans to split the profits between us. $200,000 each. The condition: Violet had to finish college within the next 2 years. I had to come back home for 6 months to help him with the transition and reconnect with the family. I looked at Violet, expecting to see shock, joy, something, but her face was perfectly calm, like a mask. "Of course, Dad, whatever you need." And that's when that first thread of suspicion began to unravel in my mind.
I spent that night in my old bedroom staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut, that primal instinct that warns you when you're being hunted. Downstairs, I could hear Violet and Dad talking, their voices too low to make out words. At 2 a.m., I heard the front door close. I rushed to the window and saw Violet getting into her car and driving away. Where was she going in the middle of the night? I should have followed her, should have demanded answers, but I was tired and scared, and so time just passed. October arrived like a cold hand on the back of my neck. I'd returned to Boston to finish some projects before the 6-month commitment to my father. Violet and I barely spoke during those weeks, communicating only through occasional texts that felt like landmines, polite on the surface, explosive underneath. "Can't wait to spend more time together," she'd write, with a smiley emoji that somehow looked threatening. Dad called weekly, asking about my plans, when I'd be back, whether I was mentally prepared for the transition. That phrase bothered me. Mentally prepared. Like I was going into battle. I drove back home on October 15th, exactly 2 weeks before Halloween. The town was already decorated. Fake tombstones in yards, paper ghosts hanging from trees, carved pumpkins grinning from porches. I'd always loved Halloween as a kid, the one night when you could be someone else, eat candy until you were sick, and scream without anyone asking why. But that year, driving through those decorated streets, I felt nothing but dread. Like the decorations weren't celebrating Halloween, they were warning me. Dad's house was transformed. Violet had gone all out with decorations. Life-size skeletons standing by the mailbox, purple and orange lights wrapped around the porch columns, a fog machine creating an eerie mist around the front door, and dozens of jack-o'-lanterns lining the walkway, each carved with a different expression. Smiling, angry, screaming. One looked like it was crying. "Violet did all this?" I asked Dad when he met me at the door. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "She's been working on it for weeks. Says Halloween's her favorite holiday. Always has been." That wasn't true. Growing up, Violet had been terrified of Halloween. She'd hide in her room while I took her candy collecting route, coming back with 2 bags full that we'd split. When did that change? The first week back was strange. Violet was overly friendly, almost manic in her enthusiasm. She'd show up at the house every morning with coffee and pastries, insisting we have sister time. She'd ask about my life in Boston, my projects, my friends, but her eyes never matched her smile. They were always watching, calculating, measuring, like she was studying me, taking notes for a test I didn't know I was taking. At night, I'd hear her in the house, walking the halls, opening and closing doors. Once I woke up at 3 a.m. and saw her standing in the doorway of my room, just standing there, silhouetted by the hallway light. "V?" I called out, heart hammering. "What are you doing?" She didn't move for a long moment. Then she said, "I thought I heard something. Just checking on you." She closed the door softly. But I couldn't sleep the rest of that night because something in her voice sounded off, like it wasn't quite her voice, like she was wearing her own voice like a mask. The second week of October, Dad started acting strange too. He'd be in his study for hours, door locked, speaking in low voices on the phone. When I'd ask what he was working on, he'd say business stuff and change the subject. But he was retired. Or supposed to be. What business? One afternoon, while he was out running errands, I tried the door to his study. Locked. I felt guilty immediately. What was I doing? Snooping on my own father? But that guilt was drowned out by curiosity and fear. I found the spare key. Dad kept them in a decorative bowl in the kitchen, same place he'd kept them for 20 years. The study door opened with a soft click. Inside, his desk was covered in papers. But not business papers, medical papers, psychiatric evaluations, and they all had Violet's name on them. My hand shook as I picked up the first document. It was dated from 5 years ago when Violet was 18. A psychological evaluation from Dr. Sarah Chin at Riverside Psychiatric Institute. The words jumped out at me. Narcissistic personality disorder, manipulative behavior, inability to empathize, potential for escalation if left untreated.
I flipped through more pages, more evaluations, more diagnoses, more warnings, all about my sister, all hidden by my father. Looking for something, I spun around. Violet stood at the doorway, arms crossed, that same calculating smile on her face. I stammered, feeling caught, guilty, wrong, even though she was the one with secrets. She walked into the room slowly, deliberately, like a cat approaching cornered prey. "It's okay, Emma. I know you found my files." She sat on the edge of Dad's desk, picking up one of the evaluations. Dr. Chen. She was so convinced there was something wrong with me. Can you imagine? Just because I saw the world differently than other people? "Violet, these say you have—" "I know what they say." She cut me off, voice sharp. "I know what everyone thinks. Poor little Violet, so messed up after her mommy died, so broken, so damaged." She laughed, but it was hollow. "But you want to know the truth, Emma? The real truth?" She leaned forward, and I could smell her perfume, something sweet and cloying, like funeral flowers. I wasn't broken by Mom's death. I was freed by it. The air in the room went cold. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Violet's smile widened. "You really don't know, do you? You think Mom died of cancer. That's what Dad told everyone. That's the story we all agreed to tell." She tilted her head. "But stories are just masks too, aren't they? Masks we wear to hide uncomfortable truths." "Violet, what are you talking about?" My voice was shaking now. She stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the Halloween decorations covering the yard. "Mom didn't die of cancer, Emma. She killed herself. Overdose of sleeping pills and vodka on October 29th, 2010, 2 days before Halloween." She turned back to me. "Want to know why?" I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at my sister, this stranger wearing my sister's face. "She found my journals," Violet continued, voice casual, like she was discussing the weather. "Found out what I was really thinking, what I really wanted, what I'd done to some of the neighborhood pets." She paused. "What I'd planned to do to her." "You're lying," I said, but my voice came out weak, unconvincing. Violet shrugged. "Am I?" "Ask Dad." "Oh, wait, you can't, because he buried those journals. Literally buried them in the backyard under Mom's rose garden. Thought if he hid the evidence, I'd somehow become normal. That love and therapy and medication would fix me." She laughed again. "But you can't fix what isn't broken, Emma. You can only hide it, mask it, pretend." I backed toward the door, but Violet moved faster, blocking my exit. "Don't run, sis. We're just getting to the good part. The part where I tell you why I really brought you here. Why Dad really called you home. Why this Halloween is going to be different from all the others." "Let me out," I said, trying to sound brave, but failing miserably. "Violet, let me out, now." She studied me for a moment, then stepped aside. "Fine. Run to Daddy. Tell him what I said. See if he believes you." She smiled that terrible smile again. "See if anyone believes you. After all, I'm the one who stayed, the one who took care of him, the good daughter. And you? You're the one who abandoned us, the one everyone will believe stole that money." I ran, down the hallway, down the stairs, out the front door into the cold October air. I got in my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I needed to go to the police, needed to tell someone what Violet had just told me. But tell them what? That my sister confessed to something years ago that had no proof? That my mother's death, ruled natural causes, was actually suicide? Based on what evidence? Violet's word against mine? And as she'd pointed out, she was the one who'd stayed, the reliable one. I was just the daughter who'd run away. I drove to a coffee shop in town, sat in my car in the parking lot, and tried to think. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Where are you? We need to talk. Come home. It's important." Another buzz, this time from Violet. "Don't tell him about our conversation. You'll only make things worse. For both of us. Trust me." Trust her? Trust the sister who just confessed to what? Tormenting our mother? Planning something? And what about the money Dad had mentioned? The missing $200,000? I drove back to the house, my mind spinning with possibilities, each worse than the last. Dad was waiting on the porch, face pale, hands trembling. "Where were you?" he asked, voice tight with barely controlled panic. I just needed some air," I said. "Dad, we need to talk about Violet, about Mom, about—" "I know," he said quietly. "I know what she told you. She called me, said she'd shared the family history." He rubbed his face, suddenly looking 20 years older. "Emma, I should have told you years ago, but I thought I could protect you, protect both of you." "So it's true?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Mom killed herself because of Violet?" He nodded slowly. "Your mother, she found things, disturbing things, journals where Violet wrote about hurting people, hurting her. She confronted Violet, and Violet told her she'd do it, that she'd hurt her if she told anyone. Your mother was terrified. She came to me, showed me the journals, begged me to get Violet help. But I didn't believe it. I thought Catherine was overreacting, that Violet was just a troubled kid acting out. And then Mom died," I finished. Dad nodded again, tears streaming down his face now. 2 days later, I found the journals, read them, realized Catherine had been right. Violet is. Something's wrong with her, Emma. Something fundamental. I've had her in therapy for years, tried every medication, every treatment. Some days she seems fine, normal. And then he looked toward the house where I could see Violet's silhouette in the upstairs window watching us. And then I see that look in her eyes, and I know she's still in there. That thing that scared your mother so much. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, anger replacing fear. "Why did you let me grow up with her, take care of her, love her without knowing?" "Because you were the only thing that made her human," Dad said desperately. "When you were around, she was better, calmer. You grounded her somehow. When you left for Boston, she got worse, so much worse. That's why I asked you to come back. Not for me, for her, to keep her stable." "So I'm what, her emotional support human? And what about the money, Dad? The missing $200,000 Violet supposedly stolen in my name?" His face went even paler, if that was possible. "How do you know about that?" "Because it's why we're all here, isn't it? That's what this Halloween dinner is really about."
Dad sank down onto the porch steps, head in his hands. "She started stealing from me 6 months ago. Small amounts at first. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. I thought maybe she had a gambling problem or drugs. But then last month, I discovered she'd forged your signature on bank documents, created accounts in your name, transferred $200,000 into offshore accounts I can't trace." He looked up at me. "I hired a private investigator. His name's Marcus. He's been posing as her boyfriend, trying to figure out what she's planning, where the money went." "Marcus?" I repeated, the name from the psychiatric files. Dr. Chen's practice. Violet mentioned a Dr. Sarah Chen. Is Marcus related? Dad nodded. Sarah's his sister. She's the one who diagnosed Violet originally. When I told Sarah about the theft, she recommended Marcus. He's a forensic accountant, works with police on fraud cases. He's been seeing Violet for 3 weeks, gaining her trust. This was insane. My sister was a diagnosed narcissist who'd possibly driven our mother to suicide, was currently stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and our father had hired a fake boyfriend to spy on her. And we were all supposed to sit down for Halloween dinner and what? Pretend everything was normal? "What's the plan, Dad?"
I asked, exhausted. What happens tonight? Tonight, at dinner, I confront her, with you there as witness, with the evidence Marcus has gathered. I give her a choice: return the money and get serious treatment, or I go to the police, press charges. And you think she'll just agree? Just like that? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The hours between that conversation and dinner dragged like years. I stayed in my room, door locked, trying to process everything, trying to reconcile the sister I'd loved with the monster dad and those files described. There was a knock on my door around 7 p.m. Emma, Violet's voice, sweet as poison honey. Dinner's almost ready. Dad wants us downstairs in 30 minutes. I made your favorite, shepherd's pie, with extra cheese, like Mom used to make. Like Mom used to make. The mother she'd tormented, the mother who'd kinked herself to escape her. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to run again and never come back. Instead, I said, I'll be down in 20, and heard her footsteps retreat down the hall. I dressed carefully, like I was preparing for battle. Jeans, comfortable shoes, a sweater I could move in if I needed to run. I know how paranoid that sounds, but paranoia is just pattern recognition when the pattern is terrifying. At exactly 8 p.m., I went downstairs. The dining room looked like a Halloween fever dream. Black and orange tablecloth, candles everywhere, their flames casting grotesque shadows. A centerpiece made of black roses and miniature skulls. And the food? Shepherd's pie, like Violet had promised, but also pumpkin soup, blood red wine, and dessert that I couldn't identify, covered with a silver dome. Dad sat at the head of the table, face grim. Violet sat to his right in that dark queen costume, looking like something out of a gothic nightmare. I took my seat to Dad's left, and that's when I noticed the fourth place setting. Who else is coming? I asked. Marcus, Dad said. He'll be joining us.
Violet's smile faltered, just for a second. Marcus? Why? Because I invited him, Dad said firmly. He's part of this family now, isn't he? Your boyfriend? The word boyfriend hung in the air like a threat. Violet's eyes narrowed. Of course, she said slowly. I just didn't know he was invited. The doorbell rang. Dad stood. That'll be him. Emma, can you get it? I walked to the front door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Opened it. A man stood there, mid-30s, dark hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Emma, he asked quietly, I'm Marcus. Your father's expecting me. I know who you are, I whispered. Does Violet know who you really are? His expression didn't change. Not yet, but she will, tonight. We walked back to the dining room together. Violet's face when she saw Marcus, really saw him, studied him, went through a series of rapid changes. Smile, confusion, suspicion, fear, and finally understanding. You're not who you said you were. No, Marcus agreed, taking the fourth seat calmly. I'm not. I'm a forensic accountant hired by your father to investigate your theft of $200,000. The temperature in the room dropped. Violet stood up so fast her chair fell backward with a crash. You planted someone? You had me followed, investigated? Her voice was rising, becoming shrill. I'm your daughter. And Emma's my daughter too, Dad said, his voice steady now, stronger than I'd heard it in years. But you tried to frame her. You forged her signature. You stole from me and tried to make it look like she did it. Why, Violet? Why would you do that? Why? Violet laughed, but it was the laugh of someone teetering on the edge of sanity. Because she left, because she got to escape while I was stuck here with you, in this house, in this town, taking care of you while you cried about Mom and pretended I didn't exist unless you needed something. She pointed at me. She got everything, the freedom, the education, the life. And what did I get?
pills and therapy and evaluations, and you looking at me like some kind of monster. You are a monster, I said quietly, surprised by my own voice. You drove Mom to kill herself. You tortured her. You made her so afraid she chose death over living with you. Mom was weak. She couldn't handle the truth, that I was smarter than her, stronger than her, that I didn't need her fake love and her pathetic attempts at mothering. Where's the money, Violet? Dad's voice cut through her rant. What did you do with the $200,000? Violet smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. I spent it on something special, something for all of us. She gestured to the covered dish in the center of the table. Actually, it's your Halloween present. Want to see? Every instinct screamed at me not to look, not to let her lift that cover, not to play into whatever game she was orchestrating. But Dad reached for it before I could stop him, lifted the silver dome, and underneath was a laptop, open, playing a video, and the video showed us, this conversation, right now, being recorded. Surprise, surprise, Violet said softly. I've been recording everything, every conversation, every accusation, every time you called me a monster, Dad, every time you admitted to hiding Mom's suicide, every word of your confession about hiring Marcus to spy on me. She picked up the laptop, turned it around, and it's streaming, live, to a private server with instructions to send it to every news outlet, every social media platform, every person we know if something happens to me. You're blackmailing us, Marcus said, voice carefully neutral. With your own confession to theft? I'm protecting myself, Violet corrected. You think anyone will believe your side after they see this? After they see how you manipulated me, spied on me, hired someone to seduce me? You'll look like the monsters, not me. The father who drove 2 daughters away and covered up his wife's suicide. The sister who abandoned her family and then tried to steal from them out of revenge. The hired investigator who violated privacy laws. She smiled. And me? I'll be the victim, the troubled young woman who acted out because of her traumatic upbringing. The room spun. She'd planned this. All of it. The confession, the money, the recordings. She'd manipulated us into exposing ourselves while making herself look like the victim. It was brilliant and absolutely horrifying. What do you want? I asked. That's the first smart question you've asked all night. Violet sat back down. Here's what's going to happen. Dad's going to wire me another $200,000. Emma's going to go back to Boston and never contact me again. Marcus is going to delete every file he collected and forget this ever happened. And in exchange, I'll delete the recordings. Everyone walks away clean. And if we don't, Dad asked, then I press send, Violet said simply. And all of this, the accusations, the stolen money, the hidden suicide, the illegal investigation, becomes public. Your business, your reputation, everything you've built, Dad, gone. Emma's architectural career, based on the idea that she's trustworthy and ethical, destroyed. Marcus's investigative license, revoked. She leaned back, examining her nails. So really, you should be thanking me. I'm offering you an easy way out. You really are sick, I whispered. Violet looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Pain? Regret? But then it was gone, replaced by that cold, empty stare. Maybe, she said, but I'm the one winning. And that's when Marcus did something unexpected. He laughed. Actually laughed, head thrown back, genuine amusement. That was impressive, he said, still chuckling. Really, the recordings, the manipulation, the blackmail, truly top-tier psychopathic behavior. There's just one problem. What? Violet snapped, her confidence wavering slightly. Marcus pulled out his phone. You're not the only one recording. He tapped the screen, and suddenly the TV in the adjacent living room came to life, showing another video. This one was older, the timestamp reading October 2010. And on the screen was teenage Violet, in Mom's bedroom, holding a pill bottle, watching Mom's unconscious form, not helping, not calling for help, just watching, waiting. "Where did you get that?" Violet's voice was barely a whisper now, all the confidence draining from her face. "Your mother installed security cameras," Marcus said calmly. "After she found your journals, she was terrified of what you might do. She recorded everything those last few weeks, including the night she died." He paused. "Except, she didn't kill herself, did you, Violet? The autopsy said overdose, and everyone assumed suicide. But this video tells a different story." On the screen, teenage Violet picked up Mom's arm, let it drop, checked her pulse, smiled, then left the room, closing the door gently behind her. "You drugged her," Dad said, his voice breaking. "You gave her those pills, staged it to look like suicide." "She was going to tell," Violet said, but her voice lacked conviction now. She was trapped, and she knew it. "She was going to ruin everything. I couldn't let her." "Your mother sent these recordings to her lawyer, with instructions to release them if anything happened to her. But she died before she could update the conditions, and the lawyer, bound by client confidentiality even after death, kept them sealed, until your father, as her widower, requested them as part of this investigation." He looked at Violet. "You didn't just steal money, Violet. You murdered your mother, and we have proof." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, kids were still trick-or-treating, their laughter a surreal soundtrack to the horror inside. Violet sat perfectly still, mask finally shattered, showing the broken, terrified person underneath. "What happens now?" she asked, voice small, childlike. "Now, you turn yourself in," Dad said, tears streaming down his face. "You confess. You face the consequences of what you've done. And maybe you get the help you should have gotten 14 years ago. And if I don't," Dad's voice was steel, "then we release the video, we press charges, and you spend the rest of your life in prison. Not as a victim, but as a murderer." Violet looked at each of us in turn. Dad, me, Marcus, looking for sympathy, for an escape route, for anything. But there was nothing. No mask could save her now. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll confess. But not because I'm sorry. I'm not. I did what I had to do to survive in this family." She stood up, shaky now. "But before I go, I want you to know something, Emma. All those years you thought I hated you, I didn't. I envied you, because you could feel things. Love, guilt, empathy. Things I've never felt. Things I'll never feel. You got to be human. And I got to be this." She gestured to herself. "So really, you won. You always won." The police arrived 20 minutes later. Marcus had called them before dinner, anticipating things might go this way. They took Violet away in handcuffs, still in her Dark Queen costume, looking like some tragic figure from a Gothic novel. She didn't look back as they put her in the patrol car, didn't say goodbye, just stared straight ahead, face blank as a fresh mask. Dad and I stood on the porch, watching the taillights disappear into the Halloween night. Around us, jack-o'-lanterns grinned their carved grins, oblivious to the real horror that had just unfolded. Dad said I'm sorry. For all of it. For not protecting you, for not believing Catherine, for waiting so long to act. "I know," I said, and surprisingly, I meant it. We were all victims of Violet, in different ways. The weeks that followed were a blur. Violet confessed to everything, the murder, the theft, all of it. The recordings Mom had made were entered as evidence. Violet was sentenced to 30 years, with possibility of parole after 15 if she showed genuine progress in treatment. Dad sold the house. Too many ghosts, too many memories. He moved to Arizona, somewhere warm and far from upstate New York winters and Victorian mansions with creaky floors. I went back to Boston, back to my life, but carrying something heavier now. The knowledge of what my sister really was, what our family really was. Marcus kept in touch, not romantically. After everything, neither of us was interested in that, but as friends, survivors of the same storm. He told me that Violet refused treatment, refused to acknowledge she'd done anything wrong, said that from her perspective, she was the victim of a family that never understood her. And maybe, in some twisted way, that was true. We hadn't understood her, hadn't known how to love someone incapable of loving back. It's been a year now, since that Halloween, and I've learned some things. I've learned that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like your little sister, with her collection of masks and her charming smile. I've learned that family secrets are like poison. The longer you hide them, the more damage they do. I've learned that sometimes the scariest thing in the house isn't a ghost or a demon. It's the person sitting across from you at dinner, wearing a mask you can't see.
This Halloween, I'm not celebrating. I'm sitting in my Boston apartment, lights off, door locked, avoiding the trick-or-treaters and the parties and the costumes, because I've learned one more thing, the most important thing. Halloween isn't about pretending to be something you're not for one night. It's about the moment when the masks come off and you see people for who they really are. And sometimes what you see is so terrifying, you wish you'd never looked at all. If there's anything I want you to take from my story, it's this. Pay attention to the people you love. Really look at them. Not at the mask they show you, but at what's beneath. Look for the inconsistencies, the moments when the mask slips, the words that don't match the actions. Because sometimes the person you're trying to save is the same person who's destroying you. And by the time you realize it, it might be too late. My therapist asks me if I ever think about visiting Violet in prison. The truth? I dream about it. I dream about sitting across from her in that gray visiting room, picking up that phone, looking into her eyes, and asking the question that keeps me up at night. Did you ever love me? Was any of it real? But I never go, because I'm afraid of the answer. Either she'll say no, confirming that my entire childhood was a lie, that the sister I loved never existed, or she'll say yes, proving that love, for someone like her, is just another mask, just another tool. And I don't know which would be worse. Dad called me last week, said he's thinking about writing a book about what happened, about living with and loving someone incapable of love, about the warning signs he missed, the red flags he ignored, the moments where he could have changed everything if he just opened his eyes. I told him I'd think about contributing, about sharing my story, because maybe someone out there is living with their own Violet. Maybe someone needs to hear that it's not their fault, that they couldn't have fixed it, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away. The money was never recovered, by the way. Violet had spent it on the recording equipment, on legal consultations about how to frame us, on building her elaborate trap. Every cent went into destroying us, while making herself look like the victim. And even knowing that, even seeing how calculated it all was, part of me still hurts for her, for the girl she could have been if whatever broke inside her had been fixed instead of hidden. But that's the thing about broken masks, isn't it? You can't repair them. You can only throw them away and hope the face underneath is still there. I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from what happened that Halloween. Don't know if the nightmares will ever stop or if I'll ever be able to trust someone completely again. But I'm trying. One day at a time, one therapy session at a time, one moment at a time when I choose not to let what Violet did define the rest of my life. Because if I do that, if I let her darkness consume me, then she wins. Even from behind bars, even with her masks finally stripped away, she wins. And I can't let that happen. So if you're watching this, if you're listening to my story, here's what I want you to remember. We all wear masks.
Every single one of us. Some to hide our insecurities, some to protect ourselves from pain, some to fit in with a world that demands conformity. But there's a difference between a mask you can take off and a mask that becomes your face. There's a difference between protecting yourself and losing yourself. And if you're not careful, if you're not paying attention, you'll wake up one day and realize the mask has become permanent, that you've forgotten what you really look like underneath. Don't let that happen. Stay real. Stay present. Stay human. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because humanity, messy, complicated, painful humanity, is the only thing that separates us from becoming what Violet became. A collection of masks with nothing underneath. A performance with no performer. A monster wearing human skin. And next Halloween, when you're putting on your costume and your makeup and your mask, remember this story. Remember that somewhere out there, someone you love might be wearing a mask too. One they never take off. And maybe, just maybe, by paying attention, by asking questions, by refusing to look away from uncomfortable truths, you can help them remove it before it's too late, before another family learns what mine learned, that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't in the movies or the haunted houses. They're at your dinner table, serving you shepherd's pie, smiling that perfect smile, wearing the face of someone you love. Stay safe out there. Watch for the masks. And if you liked this story, if it resonated with you or scared you or made you think, stick around, because I've got more to tell you. Next time, I'll talk about what I found in Mom's diary, the entries from the weeks before she died, the ones that explain exactly what Violet did to her, the ones that prove this horror story goes back farther than any of us realized. But that's for another time. Until then, remember to question everything, trust carefully, and never ever ignore your instincts when they tell you something is wrong. They might just save your life.